Welcome everybody to the April 19th, 2018 edition of the Ephrom Josine Show. This is also episode 3 of said show. This is a show hosted by me, Ephrom Josine, where we break down the latest in news, politics, and sometimes other things. Our first story tonight concerns a man named Ed Schultz, currently the host of a show simply called News on RT America, and as such, I'm acting like Putin's puppet for even mentioning his existence. However, he didn't always host on RT America. He actually used to be a host on MSNBC. In fact, his former MSNBC show, The Ed Show, is what this story is about. This is from Free Beacon. Ex-MSNBC host Ed Schultz in a recent interview ripped his former network as in the tank for Hillary Clinton and suggested he was fired in 2015 because of his support for Senator Bernie Sanders. Schultz, who now anchors on the RT show, on RT, told National Review's James Weinstein in an interview posted Friday that MSNBC chief Phil Griffin was a watchdog, and he said he was often given directions on what story to cover. Now, of course, this is something you all know, and if you actually look at RT America ads, one of the things Ed Schultz specifically promotes is, no one's telling me what to cover, I just cover what I want to and what I'm interested in. And I think that's a huge benefit, and I think the reason he was doing that was to specifically take a potshot at MSNBC, as seen by this article. Sanders gave his official campaign launch speech in Burlington, Vermont on May 26, 2015, and Schultz said he was the only cable news host planning to air it live. He had also taped an interview with Sanders at the lawmaker's home ahead of the speech. However, he said Griffin called him 5 minutes before airtime at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and said, "You're not covering this." "It got rather continuous," Schultz said. He said he was forced to cover something totally meaningless in Texas. It involved devastating flooding in Texas and Oklahoma that had killed 12 people, as well as the unrest in Baltimore over the death of Freddie Gray. Ultimately, The Ed Show did air Sanders' launch speech live when it began a little after 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. When Sanders' speech broke into the 6 p.m. hour hosted by Al Sharpton, he was cut off to go to news about development on a police case in Cleveland. Sharpton covered Sanders' announcement later in the hour. Schultz aired his interview with Sanders the following day. So right there, Schultz was still able to get his interview, but he had to work in between the lines, mind you. And it essentially got harder to do. Now, this is because there is a common myth in the mainstream media, in mainstream thought in general. And that is that MSNBC is progressive. It is not. It is not progressive. It is not liberal. It is corporatist. It is corporate Democrat. It is neoliberal. It is essentially not completely far right. It's closer to center. It's the very conservative Democrat area that if you dare go after the 5 interventions started by Barack Obama, then, oh no, you can't do that. If you dare go after the fact that DNC had said in court they could rig the primaries in 2016, you can't do that. You even mention Bernie Sanders' existence or Dennis Kucinich or any of the Justice Democrats, I can't do that. And it's just so obvious because the mainstream media has a corporatist bias. But here's some more proof right here. There may be a very good reason as to why they didn't let Schultz air it. Here's what he had to say. Schultz opened. He was forced out of MSNBC because of his support for Sanders and MSNBC's water carrying for Clinton. His final day on air was July 29, 2015. The Cycle and Now with Alex Wagner were also canceled by MSNBC that week. I think the Clintons were connected to NBC News chief Andy Lack. Connected at the hip, Schultz said. I think that they didn't want anyone in their prime time or anywhere in their lineup supporting Bernie Sanders. I think that they were in the tank for Hillary Clinton, and I think that it was managed. And 45 days later, I was out at MSNBC. Yep, that's what happened. And here's the thing, no matter what your opinions on Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders are, this is the result of there were times during the 2016 election where they showed Trump's empty podium while Bernie Sanders was out giving speeches. Explain that one to me right now. Because this mainstream media has a corporatist bias. And Bernie Sanders was an anti-corporatist. He didn't like the idea of, say, heavy deregulation or tax breaks. He didn't like the idea of giving ExxonMobil a subsidy. He didn't like the idea of bailing out Wall Street. He was against the wars. Bear in mind, this isn't even the first time they did that. MSNBC had a show planned with Jesse Ventura, and they signed a contract just before the Iraq War started. Then they found out Ventura was against the war in Iraq. And they even asked him if he could change his mind on that. And he said no, so they paid him to get out of his contract. Let me just tell you, Jesse Ventura, he also has a show on RT, by the way. You are a hero. I wish I could be that much of a nuisance to MSNBC, okay? Is bought out, and the Democrats are just as bought out as Republicans, or at the very least similar amounts of bought out. Here's a story from The Intercept. Oh wait, from the Inset Times. From In These Times. My bad, took me a minute. Senate Democrats offer little to no opposition to Trump's expansion of Syria bombing. 92% of Senate Democrats and independents failed to substantively dissent against Trump's April 13th airstrikes. These are airstrikes, mind you, that would put us in another intervention, an intervention that we do not need. It would destabilize an entire government. It would, if we were to continue fighting this fight, cost us billions in the deficit and explode the national debt to, I'd say, over 25 trillion within this one term alone, etc., etc. And Senate Democrats just don't care about that because they are also bought out by the military-industrial complex. As we pointed out yesterday, the Democrats' 2018 strategy seems to be just sitting in a burning building and going, "This is fine." Which I guess would be nice if this was actually fine or if that meant something. You know? And this includes Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, who has said nothing in opposition of any sort of substantive thing, although really expecting Chuck Schumer to say anything is really not a rational thing to do, considering he is Chuck Schumer. Just 4 out of the 49 Democrats and independent senators have expressed principled opposition to Trump's bombing campaign, those being Kirsten Gillibrand, surprisingly enough, Edward Markey, Christopher Murphy, and Bernie Sanders, obviously. And to those 4 senators, I clap for them, and I am happy for them. I wish the other 45 in the Senate would do such a thing. As, mind you, they don't even have a filibuster. Republicans don't even have a filibuster-proof majority anymore. We could still defeat them in the Senate if we actually tried. Now, of course, some tried to give some vague proposals and remarks. These include people like Joe Manchin, John Tester, Chris Van Holler, and Debbie Stabledow, all of which are technically Democrats, but still. They didn't go after on substance. It was easily just, oh, why he should have gone through Congress, which I do agree with. However, there needs to be more to it than that. It also needs to be, why should the Congress support it? Why should we take out Assad? Why should we destabilize another region and possibly give ISIS a greater foothold? And now our last story tonight comes to us from Esquire. It turns out that the House Republicans who praise the Constitution haven't actually really read it in detail. As it turns out, several members of the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, all of which are, of course, Republicans themselves, have signed an order asking Attorney General Jeff Sessions to prosecute some of the top political opponents of President Donald Trump. These, of course, include Hillary Clinton, because why wouldn't it include Hillary Clinton at this point? Does Donald Trump even have a reason for existing other than Hillary Clinton is bad? Like, seriously. I'm just asking, does he even have a reason to be in politics outside of that? I mean, that's his excuse all of his supporters immediately jump back to is, well, Hillary Clinton is bad. Okay, but let's talk about this. One of which, by the way, many of the people who signed this, by the way, are members of the House of Representatives Freedom Caucus, which really just shows to you how much of a lie the name Freedom Caucus actually is. Of course this is unconstitutional. Of course this is anti the First Amendment. Of course this is a direct violation of the idea of freedom of the press. And hopefully it will not make it any more than the ideas of some crazed lawmakers who will hopefully be voted out soon. Some of which are moving to bigger things. For instance, Ron DeSantis, he's from Florida, is currently running for governor. Todd Rogan would like to be Indiana's permission to blight the U.S. Senate. The rest of them are, of course, just typical right-wing idiots, would be the best way to call it. But I think that's really all I need to say. This idea is awful, and that's really as far as it needs to go. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Ephrom Josine Show. I'd like to say it's been a great week. We will now be seeing you again on Monday. It is unfortunate that, by the way, I was unable to even give you guys a full week of content because I got sick midway through. But, you know, stuff happens. See you next time.